we were preyed upon by so many people. We can't even share all the things that happened to each and every one of us because it was that bad. I still don't know all the details of all the things that happened to each and every one of us. But even all that, we're still here today. And that is resiliency. Welcome to Love, Listings, and Legacy, where love, community, and building a lasting impact meet. We are Mony and Sophaline, a husband and wife real estate team, sharing our perspectives on life, real estate, and philanthropy, our stories about resilience and service. Join us each week as we share our journey of life, business, and giving back, all while building a legacy for our family and community. This is Love, Listings, and Legacy, where hearts, homes, and philanthropy come together. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Love, Listings, and Legacy with Sophaline Mao and
Mony Up.
And we appreciate you coming back and thank you for all your support. In today's episode, Mony and I are going to discuss a topic that's very near and dear and meaningful for the both of us as well as our families. In this episode today, 50 years of resilience, honoring Cambodia's legacy of survival and hope. Mony and I are going to share a little bit more about our journey and our family's journey 50 years after the fall of Cambodia to the Khmer Rouge regime. So with that said, if you haven't already, please join Mony and I wherever you enjoy your podcasts as we hope to bring more of these inspiring stories over to you. So with no further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a little bit of historical context and give the folks here just a little bit of a very brief history. So if we take you back in time, on April 17th, 1975, the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, seeking to create a communist society by destroying modern life. Over the next 4 years, from 1975 to 1979, millions were forced into labor camps, and an estimated 2 million Cambodians died from starvation, disease, and mass executions. This tragic period, known as the Cambodian genocide, devastated a generation, but also gave rise to extraordinary stories of survival. Today, Cambodian communities around the world continue to honor that history through resilience, healing, and hope. In today's conversation, Mony and I want to honor those who have lost their lives, as well as all of the survivors who continue to strive for a better future today. And so with that said, I have the honor of interviewing my husband, Mony, who is a direct survivor of the Cambodian genocide. And 50 years later, as we sit here before you in Livermore, California, as Cambodian Americans, we want to take this time, and especially this episode, to really honor and look back at the past 50 years of resilience that our community has shown. So I'm going to ask my husband, are you ready to open up about your experiences?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your love and support. We really, really appreciate you. And I'm ready to share my story and even more details of all the memories that I had to go through all the way from Cambodia to Thailand to the Philippines to the United States of America. So let's do it.
Great. So, as we kind of just kick things off, obviously, this topic is heavy, but yet the tone that I want to convey is that it's one of hope and resilience and hope, and that we all can, learn from it and continue to support one another. So, Mony, can you share a little bit about your family's journey to America after the fall of Cambodia to the Khmer Rouge?
Yes. Well, first of all, I was born in 1972, so literally 52 years ago. And that's how old I am. But literally after I was born, the story was told to me was that 7 days after I was born, my mother and I was 7 days old, had to be flown in a helicopter from the area of the Battambang province to the border of Thailand and Cambodia in the Poipat area. So that's the beginning of my life. Literally, bombs were going off in the village that I grew up in or where I was born. And so that's the beginning of my life. It's rough. But my childhood memory is that, growing up in the killing fields of Cambodia, where some of my memories include my mother going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. My father is gone all day. And sometimes he would show back up at the house with the fish that he had snuck in from the farm, or eggs, or whatever food, like literally that he can get his hand on, to bring that back home and share that with us. Some of my other memories include eating dried mice, really. You catch the field mice, and you skin them, you season them, and you dry them on top of the roof, the grass roof hut that we live in. We live in a home with 4 stilts above ground, but no running water, no electricity, or any food or refrigerator or anything like that of modern society. So those are some of my early memories. So.
Wow, it sounds like, first of all, the fact that you were so young, I mean, as an infant born into conflict in Cambodia already and coming into a world that had so much conflict already, I think is very trying for anyone. And so, as the stories are passed down, what has stayed with you from that time? I mean, obviously our parents being survivors themselves and your parents, I'm sure they've passed down a lot of stories, but is there anything that you recall from your own childhood that you could share with the audience today?
I just remember, living in a shack where I had to go to bed hungry every night. But my greatest memory of my childhood was when we, as children, waiting for our parents to return home from working on the fields. And then in the evening, we would get to see them. We would all sit in a mass tent, and all the boys and girls at that time, I was about five and a half years old. We would all sit in a circle on a dirt floor, clenching onto a bowl and a spoon. And we're just waiting for some adult to put some food in the middle of the circle, so this way we could begin to eat. And can you imagine sitting on the floor, dirt floor, with, when I say bowl and spoons, I don't know how raggedy it is or broken it is or whatnot, but I just remember holding onto a bowl and a spoon, waiting for someone to put the food into the center of the circle so we could begin to eat. So finally, I don't know how long we had to wait, but one time someone finally put some food in the middle. We devoured it within seconds. So the food ran out, of course, and then we waited for the second time for someone to put more food. So the second time when the food was running out, I decided that I was so hungry, more than all the other children, that I decided to dump the rest of it into my bowl. One kid jumped up, got really, really angry, and then latched onto me and bit me. I still have a 2-inch bite mark on the right side of my shoulder today. That's the childhood that I remember. I just remember stealing every food that I could imagine, because my mother always said that they always pass out some ration. I just remember stealing as much as I can for the family. She said, I've always done that since I was 3 years old. So those are some of the early memories that I had. But eating roots, eating mice, eating snakes, eating iguanas, whatever you can get your hands on when you're young, and then you're so poor and you was born in a war that you don't see your parents all day long. You don't get to go to school. You don't have any toys. You have none of that.
Right.
You just had to do whatever you had to do in order to survive. But I just remember going to bed hungry every night, and that was, it hurts. It hurts you sometimes, especially your stomach, of course, when you don't have a full stomach to go to bed with.
Yeah, I know you've shared a lot of that as well in previous episodes, but I think that as a child, it's actually remarkable that you actually remembered those things. But I guess, you have pivotal moments in your life as a child when you are going to remember things like that. And, just curious, did your parents openly tell you about some of these stories, or did you hear from siblings? I'm just curious, how aware were you of your family's history when you guys came to the U.S.? Was it something easy for them to talk about, I guess?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not easy for them to talk about. In fact, I'm still not very close with my father there because I think he kept a lot of it from us. In fact, years later, I learned of how his father died. My grandfather died on his part where the French secret police thought he was working for the Communist Party and took his father and shot him down the road when he was young. This is before he met my mother, and we became a family, and I was born as a result, right? But there's just so many memories of that, hearing that. But for my experience, it's just growing with the chaos. For example, at one point during the first 7 years of my life, the Communist Party took my father away for like 8 months. No one knew where he was. No one. So my mother one day packed up and took us as children and walked miles. I don't know how many miles, but we remember stopping next to a river where the ox ate all the rice that we had that night. And we kept going, and we ended up in some village where my mom left us, my siblings and I, in this village, and she went to find my father. He came home 2 days later with my father with a towel wrapped around his waist, and that's all he had. Yeah. Because where he was taking a bath in the river, they bombed it, so he had to leave and left only just a towel on his body, and came back. But imagine us as child being left behind, not knowing where your parents are for a couple of days. Those are the memories I had. And then, walking up and down the hills and mountains, where we have no idea where we're going. You don't know if you're going to step on landmines or anything like that, because still today, Cambodia still has one of the most planted landmines in the world, right? But my younger brother got sick, and I remember just his bleeding everywhere. And in fact, my older sister, the story she told us is that she wished he would just died. Those are the memories I had. But he didn't. He made it here in the United States of America, and he's still alive today. But those are some of the early memories that we had as kids, being abandoned per se, or just don't know what's going to happen, or you're going to have a meal at any point. You just don't know. But I don't know if we survived it, but with God's grace, we're here. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah, no, that's an extraordinary story of survival for sure. I think many Cambodians, whether they're still in Cambodia today or here, anywhere in the diaspora, everyone has a story. Everyone has stories of their own families suffering and their own families' survival. Yet, when our community came here to rebuild a life, I think everyone has been so resilient, and many have found different ways to cope with their trauma. And it wasn't something that was so readily understood by especially our elders, because mental health is still sometimes a taboo in our culture. And unfortunately, there weren't any resources that had the cultural background and understanding. I think it's changing now with especially like my generation, the 1.5, and then obviously the second generation now, who are doing amazing things like telling our stories and making sure that this part of our history doesn't go forgotten, because it's really easy to sweep history under the rug and either pretend like it never happened or kind of just, brush it off. And so today, Mony and I wanted to especially dedicate this episode because this month of April 2025 marks the 50th commemoration of the fall of Cambodia, as well as the fall of Saigon, as many of us are aware from our U.S. history class as the Vietnam-American War. So I wanted to kind of bring it back to our theme of resiliency, and wanted to just really open it up to Mony and say, what does the word resilience mean to you, especially when you think about your family's journey and how they have come from Cambodia to rebuild in the U.S.? First of all, resiliency is just, the first thought that came to mind is about the journey of life. For example, when I was 6.5 years old, I had to walk from Cambodia to Thailand. And while bombs going off, people getting shot and maimed and dead bodies all over the place, right? Then you got into Thailand, you barely made it across the border without getting shot. And then you finally got in Thailand, you finally get the chance to go to school, and then you lived there, and not knowing if we had an opportunity to come to the United States of America, Australia, France, we look just waiting for a sponsor, or you're going to get shipped back if you don't have a sponsor, and you can stay there several more years. Mm-hmm. So after 4 years, we finally got permission to come to the United States of America. But before we came to the United States of America, they shipped us to the final refugee camps from Well, first of all, we lived in several refugee camps in Thailand itself, got transferred from one camp to another to another. Then finally, we got, in 1982, we got transferred to the Philippines and lived in a tropical forest there in Morong Bataan, Philippines, for another 9.5 months. And then you finally got the final case that, all right, you finally have a sponsor in America to come to Tempe, Arizona. And then our sponsor was my grandfather's friend who sponsored us through the church program and got us to come to the United States of America. I mean, imagine, I can't imagine the exhilaration of what my mom and dad must have.
Yeah, it's like a new world. It's a new opportunity.
Right? It's just the opportunity to come to the United States of America. Because as a child, I remember when you were, whether you're in the Philippines or in Thailand, when you receive a letter that says USA on it, I'm like, oh my God. Or you see, a Caucasian person in Thailand in refugee camps. Man, that is special. That is like, wow, that's the childhood memories that I grew up with. But it was just hard. I mean, the greatest memory is that just going to bed hungry every night. Whether I was in the refugee camps in Thailand or whether I was in the refugee camps in the Philippines before we came to the United States of America.
Well, it sounds like when you all went through that, it built up a lot of strength. And I know a lot of our fellow Cambodian Americans had a lot of challenges, especially rebuilding lives here in the new country, new culture, new language. When you think about resiliency, can you share any experiences that your siblings or, mom and dad had here, just like adapting to a new culture? Yeah,
first of all, just the journey itself, it really tested you. And in order for you to be successful today, and I believe that I am successful today, very, very successful today. And in fact, if you look at where we came from and how we got started with nothing and then to build a life of today, being here now 42 years in America. But it was a lot of challenges. When we arrived here in the United States of America, my father spoke a little bit of English. My mom didn't. My mom only had 6 months of education in her whole entire life. So she doesn't know the language. She in fact, she knows the language, the primary language, Khmer, really, really well, but she couldn't read or write, maybe first grade level of that. I mean, you should see her writing. She's only went to school for 6 months because she's a female. She was like a second-class citizen in Cambodia already, but coming here, so you have to learn the language. You have to learn the culture. You have to go to school. Well, but also you have to, I didn't notice until I was, in my 40s to realize the trauma that my parents carried. That trauma led to my father being an alcoholic, being a gambling addict. My mother, who's not educated, would go with him. So they literally brought us to the United States of America and left us to fend for ourselves. There's a lot of prey. And I just learned recently that all the things that happened to each one of my siblings or what other people have done to us. It's crazy. Can't even imagine what they all go through. So that in itself is very, very difficult to overcome. And of course, when you didn't speak the language, what kind of job are you going to get? My father started working for the post office and then doing mails, whatever, not delivering mail, but just doing mail, processing mail. Mm-hmm. So he's probably getting like $5-6 an hour. Mm-hmm. Then when he find time, he would go gambling, right? So these are some of the early memories. And then that's what's in Tempe, Arizona. And 9 months later, we end up in Stockton, California, where my father literally started gambling all the time when no one's home. Or when they do gamble, they gamble at the house. They would gamble all day, smoke cigarettes everywhere. It was just crazy. We lived in a house at the same time. So those are the early childhood memories I had. And also, at one point, I said enough is enough. I had to go start making my own money. So I start working out in the fields with the Mexican Hispanic, picking strawberries, cucumbers, cherries, tomatoes, boysenberry, blackberry. And I worked all the way to Oregon, all the way, especially during the summertime. I would travel to another state just to work. And then while I was working, when we get back to the camp, my father taught us how to gamble. We would lose all the money we just made for the day. That's the craziness of what life has brought us, the challenges. But to go through all that, to learn about how to gamble, to learn how to live in a household that is broken, with chaos, with just so much instability, domestic violence of way of life growing up, to go through all that and then make it today, That is a definition of success and resilience.
Yeah, definitely. I think hearing your story over and over again, I feel like every time I hear it, it really speaks of resilience, because you could either fold and just give up and just accept the way that things are, accept your circumstances, or you can challenge your circumstances and say, hey, it doesn't matter how I started in life, it matters where I'm going. And I think for many of us from the younger generation, and when I say younger, I mean between Mony and I, he experienced the Cambodian genocide, and so he is a direct survivor. I am an indirect survivor. I'm a 1.5 because I was born just literally a few months after my parents escaped. And so I may have inherited some of the trauma, but I, as being born after, I was born afterwards, but I feel like a lot of those traumatic experiences my parents actually carried with them. But I don't think in the sense of, they had their own trauma, but they were able to find other ways to heal. And I think that many families like yours, honey, unfortunately, there isn't that immediate realization of oh my gosh, I need to heal myself so that my children and my grandchildren don't take on these, scars, right? Because I think that, through mom and dad, because of, again, their pain and their suffering and their experiences. And then also you couple that with just their own childhood trauma. They didn't know how to deal with it in a positive way. And so they found themselves with these maladaptive coping behaviors like alcoholism, gambling, and violence.
Right, but absolutely. But part of the difference is in your family, for example, you had your mom and dad, but also your father was educated. He worked for the government. My father grew up in a village. My mother grew up in a village.
Yeah.
So they never really know what urban life looked like. They don't know what the living in the Phnom Penh, the capital, the city, what that looked like. They just knew the farm. They knew how to grow stuff. They knew how to sell those products that they grew on a farm. So it's completely different lifestyle. And when you come here, not only to a foreign land, but man, everything, when you say foreign, it's completely foreign to all of us.
Well,
so that's the challenge, at that moment. And then not only to mention all the trauma that they came with it, for example, my father met my mom later on, but his father was shot to death when he was 5.5 years old. His mother died 6 months later. So now he's living in a monastery with the monks, growing up without any parents.
Right, I was going to say that too.
Then the refugee camps happened and came to the United States of America. Holy cow. It took me years to understand, why did my father abandon us when we got here? We literally went to school on our own. I had to sign all my own paperwork since I got here in the United States of America. But if I wasn't so resilient, per se, I wouldn't have made it this far, right? But it's not, looking back, could my father have done something better? But yes. But did he know what he was going through? The likely answer is going to be no. And that allows you to heal more, forgive more, as well as result.
Yeah, I think definitely having been brought up differently, and also too when you grow up, for Dad, very sadly, he grew up as an orphan. And so growing up, he was raised in a monastery and he received the basic needs like food and shelter, and he was somewhat safe, but yet what he lacked was love
and family structure and all that.
A family structure. And then I think between our parents, to me, it doesn't matter whether you're from the rural side of Cambodia or if you're from the city. I feel like Cambodian cultural values, it stems from family. First of all, there is a sense of this filial piety that we all have in our culture, honoring your parents, carrying on the family name, things like that we've been brought up with. My parents always told me, you represent the family. So it's not an individualistic culture, it's a collective culture. And so Cambodian culture is very about you sacrifice your own needs for the family, whereas here, when we grew up in the West, we're taught to be independent, to be more, about the individual. So,
in that case, you had your mom and dad, where I grew up with even though my parents were alive, but they weren't part of my life. So I don't know what that is. Like, I literally did everything on my own since I got here in the United States of America. So I don't know what going to the Buddhist temple meant. I don't know what the traditions are. That's why I had to ask you, like, what does that mean? Like, we knew that we were supposed to go to a temple and all that, but I didn't know what are the traditions. What was the meaning behind those traditions?
Of it,
the significant, like, why? What does that mean? I have no idea until, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, I'm learning all these things about the who I am. But actually, the more I learn about me, the more I understand why I am the way I am. Because I didn't know, whether it's from me speaking a certain way or react a certain way. But that's who I was. That's the person I was taught to grow up with. The brokenness, it takes a lot to heal. So and I'm assuming that, I just know that there's so many more that are just like me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm successful. I feel like I'm successful, but I'm almost like the exception to the rule.
I mean, I think that's a great point about the generational trauma, because you sometimes, if you don't heal your own self, what you inadvertently do is you pass it on to your children and your grandchildren.
You can only heal yourself if you became educated, and you became aware of it. But until 49 years old, until 3 years ago, there was so many things about me that I wasn't aware of who I am, why I did a certain way, certain things in a certain way, say a certain thing and do a certain way of things. I just didn't know.
It's self-awareness. But it's also, to me, I feel like it's your own self-awareness and like discovery that you want to do for yourself. And that's something that, we want to also really openly share, is that sometimes when you're just going about your day to day, you don't think about that. But in actuality, it actually has a really significant impact on your friendships, your relationships, how much money you make, your educational level. Because if you've been brought up with a lot of trauma that you've never healed, you can't go on to be the best person that you can be. And sometimes that trauma is passed down just through your ancestors and through their experiences and the history. So when we look at healing from generational trauma, it's actually a long journey. And just like Mony, it took him 4 decades. We're all still healing. There's a lot of things that even into our middle age, into like our adult years, is that how we react to certain triggers. When certain things don't go our way, when something happens that we don't expect, we actually react out in a way that we've been conditioned to react to. And that's something that Mony and I, just as a married couple, we've realized, because we react differently. And that's not to say that it's bad. Certain things you have to catch yourself. You got to check yourself when you're realizing like, oh, that's my trigger. And like, I need to like not react that way, because you know what, like I'm not in that environment anymore. And it's very common actually for a lot of people who are survivors of like domestic violence, abusive relationships, because when you're talked to a certain way, it activates your fight or flight. So
you just go back to the defense mode.
Right. Because that's how, if you like, for me, like, for example, like certain things, if people say certain things to me, and it could be volume, it could be tone, it could be certain words, it triggers my fight or flight system, and sometimes people freeze. So there's fight, flight, or freeze. And sometimes, it's easier to like fight back. But what I'm learning is that, sometimes it's not worth it, right? Because it doesn't solve anything. And there's only understanding yourself. Can you heal through that? So what I want to do is turn it back to Mony and kind of say, how has your family approached healing over the years? I know you and your siblings have recently kind of, reconnected. And can you maybe share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So first of all, we're still all learning. I know my siblings are still struggling with a lot of different things that they're learning through their trauma, right? And they might not be aware. But one of the coolest things that happened during COVID was that I had a chance to speak with the counselor who actually, for the first time in our lives, all four of my siblings, including myself, 5 of us, came together on a Zoom meeting. We had many, many sessions together on a Zoom meeting during COVID. That's the part of the blessing of COVID, by the way. And as a result, we took a trip together to St. Thomas. Mm-hmm. I took my siblings to St. Thomas. And the reason why I said that so significantly is because we grew up in such a broken family. Like my brother left when, well, first of all, I graduated from the police academy when I was 22 years old. As a result, only my younger sibling, Mala, came to my graduation. My brother got beaten up by my mom and then ended up moving to Texas. My other younger brother ended up getting involved in methamphetamine, and he struggled all these years. My older sister got married and ended up with a drug addict and had 4 kids that she had to raise as a single mother and going to work at full time, So, and my other, so I could tell you trauma and drama after one another. So it took a lot to learn, but we have never been together as adults. And that trip, 2-3 years ago now, that we had a chance to spend time with each other, we learned so much about each other. There was some missing link, there's a missing timeline that things happened to each and every one of us. We were preyed upon by so many people. We can't even share all the things that happened to each and every one of us because it was that bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still don't know all the details of all the things that happened to each and every one of us. But even all that, we're still here today. And that is resiliency.
Well, I think also the healing comes with courage as well. And it's easy to, look at, how come they didn't go and get help and stuff. And it's never that easy. It's never that easy. So, I commend
not
you.
Not that easy, but each person has their own timeline.
Well, I think, okay, so yeah. So what I was going to say was that, everyone can say, it's easy. Why don't you just go and heal yourself or go get help? No, you cannot force somebody to get help until they're ready.
That's right.
Especially when it comes to a lot of very heavy emotional trauma, that physical trauma too, that people have been through. So people are ready to heal when they're ready. And I have to say is that as family members and loved ones, you have to support them when they're ready, but you cannot force them.
That's right. And sometimes they don't even recognize that all the pain that they had came from all the things they grew up with. They just don't know. And a lot of times they don't know, but it's not because they're ignorant, because they weren't educated to know what trauma looked like, to be aware, to be self-aware. Like I take more self-awareness about me and all the things that I've gone through more so than ever now. Not to say that I'm perfect. I have far from perfect. I have so much work to work on me, but at least I'm much more aware of who I am and why I do certain things a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's through your journey of learning about your history, which you kind of put behind you when you moved to Livermore because it was so painful. You essentially abandoned just the things that were hurtful, especially within your own family, within the community that you were in, that proved to be quite a negative impact, on your life. And then you came to Livermore and you basically tried to rebuild and just kind of forget everything. And then I think, coming back full circle after we met, I feel like that's when I really wanted you to see that what you knew of Cambodian culture is actually another version of the trauma.
Negative side of the trauma.
It's the trauma of the culture, and that Cambodian culture has always been very loving. It's always very respectful. It's very kind. It's very generous. People are always very willing to help each other. But what the Khmer Rouge did, and for those of you who may not kind of understand the context of it, was they conquered by dividing people. And as Mony had mentioned earlier, one of the things that the Khmer Rouge did was they divided the people. So they turned the people from the rural class, so the farmers, the people who are from the rural provinces, or versus the people from the city. And so during the Khmer Rouge regime, my parents were deemed enemies of the state because they happen to just be from the capital city of Phnom Penh. They had no affiliation to the previous government or anything, but because they were educated, because they, went to French public schools, because they had these, government jobs, because they lived in these, nice houses in the city and had education and cars and modern clothes, they were persecuted. They were really persecuted. And so when we talk about what Cambodians like my parents went through, that itself was very traumatic because they were forced out of their homes and they were told to just pack enough for 3 days and that the Americans were going to bomb Phnom Penh, and if you didn't get the heck out, you're going to die. And so my grandparents, my mom, her siblings, my dad, my grandparents, they had to literally, can you imagine packing just enough stuff for 3 days and never seeing your home again, never seeing your family again. So for them, that was very traumatic. And I didn't realize that until later when I didn't understand why my mom hated moving. She hated moving because it brought her back to April 17th, 1975. But that experience is what shapes who we are today. And so like our elders have helped shape who we are today. So Mony talks about, his elders, his parents, kind of bringing them here. And it was all about, hey, we're here in America. You got to survive, So are there any specific values, I guess, or lessons from your elders that you feel proud to carry on? I'm sure that like your parents have taught you something about life, about family, anything that you can remember?
Well, I mean, because my parents were hardly there. My mom, I knew they loved me, but I never knew how they loved me. So I don't know what that is because they're never there. So I felt like I wasn't loved, so I just had to go find where love is, and no matter where it may be. But that in itself, you be left to be preyed upon by other people, right? So, but nonetheless, now that I'm a little bit more educated about who I am and where I came from and all the trauma, I know they love me. So I have a better relationship with my father now than I have ever been in my life. So I find it more forgiving to understand where he was coming from, and that I think one of his mission, or one of my mother's mission and my father's mission, is that we're going to do everything we can to bring you to the United States of America. Once you got here, yes, it may be difficult. Yes, we're abandoning you because of all our own trauma that they may not even realize, but it's still a better life than I would have had during the war and the killing fields of Cambodia.
By far.
By far, right? So the fact of the matter, I'm here. I can't blame them. Now things could have been a lot better, of course, if they educated, they would work harder, they would know more, right? But that's not the point. The point is that that's what happened. But the fact that they brought me here to the United States of America, it is my journey to make something of myself. And I started that when I was 16 years old. To the journey of becoming a police officer at the age of from 16 and finally became a police officer at the age of 22. That day on December 4th, 1995, the day that changed my life.
So that's why building a legacy now moving forward, because of your resiliency and because of just, your experiences, I'd say, the past, again, it's been only 50 years. So we're like 5 decades from this horrible genocide. Looking back now, what does building a legacy mean to you as a Cambodian American now that you have kind of come full circle and learning a bit more about your Cambodian heritage and your culture? What does building a legacy mean to you now?
Part of my legacy in my life is that let's take care of the people in your own community here. Okay. While you're doing that, also look at your own Cambodian, family, whether your own family or other families. Look at their lives too. How can you help? So not only you could help the people that you surrounding you, that you live with in this community, but you also have to take the time to volunteer your time. For example, that's why you and I, we both serve on Caring for Cambodia International Nonprofit, for example, right? We've been to Cambodia. We've donated. Whatever we can do to help. No, we're not multi-millionaire, a billionaire, or anything like that. But we do what we can based on what we have, the little that we have. But we want to be able to make contribution no matter how small. So the idea is that the part of the legacy is like, now that you've done decently well, what are you going to do to make the difference on the lives of others? That's why, for example, one of my goals would be to build a tech hub in Cambodia and Siem Reap to change the region economically by providing the education and the training, the specialized training, so the next generation of Cambodian students can take that training and improve the lives of for themselves and their families. Whether it's moving in, from the villages into more towards the city, whatever it is, the point of the matter is that we could change their lives through education. That's why we serve. That's why we donate. That's why we give our time. Because of that, is that part of your legacy is to make a difference now that you made it.
That's beautiful. Definitely, I agree. And that's why when I had the opportunity to bring technology into Cambodia, even though it was probably a really risky move, but I still did it because I felt like, if not me, then who? To make that impact. And sometimes you have to kind of be the first one to do it. So, in terms of when we talk about building legacy, how do you think the next generation of Cambodian Americans can honor our history?
Well, I see there's a lot of things we could do on a national level, but I don't think I think there's a lot of our people, we still have the crab mentality. We're still affected by the trauma, meaning that when you see other people successful, the crab mentality is about pulling people back into the pot rather than just let them roam out and then discover the world. The world is so much bigger, right? So how do we help everybody to push them out to the limits, to do more, to be more, to give more for our own community? So that's part of the legacy that we could think about. Like for me, I think about 4 things. Like, what can we do? If I had the money, all the money in the world, I think about a political action committee together and then help Cambodian American to run for office, so the way they could speak about us, preserve our language and culture through school, through holding offices, or building a cultural center that has all the instructor come into one place, learn all the nuances of a culture, and take those training back to the community, wherever they are, whether it's in Cambodia, whether it's in France, whether it's America, whether different states or villages, it doesn't matter, but they get a chance to come here and they take that information back, or we help people get elected into the office, so this way they can speak about preserving the language and culture, or provide that language and culture training to other people outside of Khmer people, or the next generation of Khmer people. Or we look at the top 10 population in America. What are some things you could do in order to enhance those organizations are helping Cambodian American? So those are the things that I think about when it comes to, leaving that legacy for us as now that we've been here, what are we going to do next to help the next generation? Those are some of the things that we can do.
Okay, so I guess in summary then, it sounds like the next generation can do less of the crab mentality.
Absolutely. But one of the proudest thing that I see now is that a lot more the 1.5 generation and the second generation, they're becoming really educated. They're making education a priority, right? Once you do that, I think education will change everything, but it will take time to do so.
Well, I think also too, if I may respectfully say so, my generation and afterwards, we didn't grow up with scarcity. We didn't grow up fighting for food. Yeah. So when you come into this world and your natural instincts are threatened by, like, you can't even eat, there's something in your brain where naturally, if you feel like there's not enough to go around, so you feel like you got to tear people down. But I honestly, and just through my decades of working in our community, what I have seen is that the 1.5 and the ones who were born here, the second, third generation, there's less of that crab mentality, but there's more of other issues that they deal with because of what the parents and what the grandparents invoke on them. So I think for me, I have hope with the next generation. And just like you said, like your own children, they're not going to suffer as you did, because they were born in America. They grew up speaking the language. They know the culture. They got an American
not
education.
All of them know the culture,
but,
though. Yeah.
But they still, I'm talking about the Western culture. I'm talking about they're born in American culture. But yes, to your point, because they're born here, they don't know their Cambodian culture, but they're Native Americans is what I meant. But I think, when we look back at kind of like, the 50 years of what our community has done, though, I wanted to see, like, if we fast forward 50 years into the future, what do you hope the Cambodian American legacy will look like by then?
50 years from now, to me, we will have second, third, maybe fourth generation here. I think that we will continue to do well because, first of all, being Asian American, Cambodian American, it doesn't matter. Education has always been a priority. So we focus on education, rebuilding ourselves. We could build whatever we need to build. I see a bright future, So every time I see a Cambodian student graduating or going to Harvard, for example, Princeton, or graduate from any university from around the country, whether in America or abroad, or in Australia or France, or doesn't matter where they go. The fact that they're graduating, they're getting themselves educated, that means they're going to be lifting their families out of poverty wherever they are if they have to go back. I think that's tremendous. We're on the trajectory to move up, but we help each other and lift each other rather than tearing each other down. That's what it's all about.
I think it's already beginning. I have a lot of hope for the next generation through what I've seen and my involvement with the younger Cambodian Americans and also Cambodians in Australia and the whole diaspora around the world. And even when you look at Cambodia, especially. I'm so proud of the work of this younger generation of Cambodians who are really coming out and stepping out and really trying to make the world a better place for themselves. So I guess in wrap up, if you could send a message back in time to your ancestors, or, what would you say? Anything you would say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Just thank you for being so beautiful, actually. Our culture is amazing, which I didn't know until, recent, right? So the language, just so much love in the language in itself, just the traditional clothing, the many monuments and temples that we've had. That's because someone had a vision, a leadership to do so, right? To share all that. And tradition, the empire in itself, it's done extraordinarily well. But if it wasn't for the war, I think we would surpass Thailand and many in Southeast Asia. I think because we had the education system that was amazing back until the late 60s, right, 70s, and until before the war, until after the war, and then it really vanished, right? But thank you for doing all that. Thank you for the vision and the leadership to give us all that. So this way we can remember who we are, where we came from, and why we are Cambodian American, and we should be very, very proud of that.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you, honey, for openly sharing. I know this episode was a bit heavy and it is very emotional because this is directly our story as the children as of survivors, but Mony himself being a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. It's hard to believe that 50 years has gone by, and here we are in the U.S. I guess all I have to say is that it's really important that we know our history and that we also know the trials and tribulations of what our ancestors have gone through. Because if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going,
and you don't know who you are.
You don't know who you are, and I think I've been very blessed that I have been able to maintain a sense of who I am. And so for me, being Cambodian has always been a core identity of myself. No matter where I go, no matter where I live, no matter who I'm interacting with, there is something very proud and prideful that I have about being Cambodian. And to me, and it's the way that I am kind to other people. It's the way I carry myself. It's the way that I want to do good and help others. I think that is truly the values of our Cambodian culture, and about being very kind. I think that is something that I really truly value about our culture, and especially at this time of year. So with that said, Mony and I want to thank you all so much. And we also want to honor those who have gone before us and thank them for their sacrifices, and may their souls rest in heaven. And we hope that you found this episode to be very insightful as well as very inspiring in some ways as you're on your own journey of healing, and that resilience will find its way if you just have faith and that you just believe in yourself. And before that, while we wrap up, do you have any final words?
Yeah, long live Cambodia, and let's rise together. Together is where we're going to make a huge difference, but we have to come together. I hope that you'll consider that, and I hope you'll look at yourself deeply and reflect upon your own journey and look at what are some ways that you could make a difference. There's so many small little ways you can do that, but more importantly, lift each other up, inspire each other, and help each other where we can. So have a great life.
Great. So with that said, it's April. So ជូនពរសុខស្ដីឆ្នាំថ្មីបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាជូនពរឲ្យមានសេចក្តីសុខសុភមង្គលហើយនិងសុខភាពល្អ So សូមអរគុណសូមជម្រាបលា Thank you all so much, and we hope you will give us a like and a follow, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So thank you so much, and Mony and I will see you in a future episode. Thank you.
សួស្ដីឆ្នាំថ្មី
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining Love, Listings, and Legacy this week. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Join us next time as we continue to navigate the path from adversity to success, one property and one purpose-driven decision at a time. Thanks for listening.